I am a couple of things I want to remind you about since I missed morning meetings this morning, sorry. We are having an open mic in the barn tonight. Hetty and Arista are running the show. Zoomers are welcome. We will have the ability to have you participate. So I think there'll be a sign-up sheet for folks in here. We'll put one out on the desk in the front. But if folks in Zoom land would like to participate in the open mic, please send me, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I will make sure that you get on the list, okay? Also, Zoomers, dinner with me over Zoom at 5 o'clock tonight, if you wish. Okay. Very happy to introduce a friend of the program, friend of mine, Rachel Ekstrom Courage, who is a literary agent with Folio Literary Management. I know this is one of the areas that our MFA program doesn't have a lot of, we don't spend a lot of time talking about agents. So I'm always really excited to bring in friends of mine who can talk to that, speak to that, and answer your questions, because I know you have lots of questions about this. So I'm going to let Rachel introduce herself further and tell you a bit about her background. And she's going to have a presentation, talk with you, and then she's going to leave lots of time for your questions. Okay? So please welcome Rachel.
Thank you, Sheila. I am so happy to be here. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. As I was saying to Sheila, this is my first time talking to a group of people since before the pandemic that are not solely on Zoom. So welcome to you who are on Zoom, and it's so nice to see the others in person. I am going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then I want to leave us at least that much time for questions. So if you don't have questions, or you have questions that you're a little nervous about, maybe jot them down, because I would really love to get to as many questions as possible. I'm just gonna bring up this one thing. And yeah, so first of all, how many people in here, show of hands, and on Zoom, maybe you can use the little raise your hand function. All right, most of you, I think. Who is writing nonfiction? Okay. Who is writing? Do we have anyone writing for children or young adults in here? A couple? All right. Anyone writing poetry or anything like that? Okay, quite a number of poets. Excellent. Okay. Now, Sheila, am I looking in the right place? Okay, people on Zoom, am I looking at you? Okay, thanks. There's like 3 monitors, a camera back there, so I'm still getting used to it. Okay, so I'll tell you who I am. I'm Rachel Ekstrom Courage. I am an agent at Folio Literary Management. And what that means is basically that I am looking for wonderful stories, wonderful authors. I want to find these stories, help shape and polish them if need be, and sell them to publishers so that someone can have a career with a traditional publisher, ideally over the course of many books, and make money and reach readers, and also have their books not just in print, but in audio, in translation, etc. How I got here is kind of a circuitous route. I'm from Pittsburgh. I love the Burgh. Woo! I'm also co-founder of Litsburg, which, if you don't know about it, is an online literary community that celebrates all of Pittsburgh's wonderful literary scene, whether it's the bookstores, the writers. So if you're not familiar with it, please do check it out. But I was an English major in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved books. So after college, I moved right to New York and I got a job in publishing. I did not know what publishing was. I really thought it was like a big printing press. When you see in old movies, when they're printing newspapers and it's just like a lot of machinery, kind of thought that's what a publisher was. And then I realized there were these things called editors. I applied for lots of editorial assistant jobs, did not get them, but I think it was the HR department said, well, we do have an opening in publicity. Would you try that? And I was like, great, yes, please put my name down for that. What is publicity? So I started out, that's the job I got. I got my talking to people about books, getting the word out, whether it was reviewers, media, booksellers, working directly with authors. So that was a great overview to the business. And I worked at St. Martin's Press and I worked at Penguin for about a decade. I see clapping for Penguin. I want to know more about that later. So I worked with like a wide range of authors, fiction, nonfiction, big bestsellers, debut authors, literary authors, really commercial authors. So that was a really good experience and overview, but I did not get to choose my projects. I had to work on whatever they gave me. As I got a little more, as I became a little more experienced, I was able to request things. For example, no one was giving me any YA projects, but I loved YA. So I was able to ask for some YA projects and eventually work on some. But the reason I became an agent was because I wanted to choose my projects. I wanted to have some agency and I have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I thought I could combine my love of talking about books and finding books and sharing my enthusiasm and passion, but being able to be in charge of what's on my list instead of just taking whatever's assigned to me, whether I like it or not, whether I agree with it or not, or whether or not, I can put my stamp on it. I'm not a super heavy editor, but by the time I saw books as a publicist, they were done. They were copy edited, they were done. I get to work with authors and say, okay, this is amazing, but this ending is not working. What can we do to fix it? So that was really different and exciting for me to be able to be part of the earlier stages. But so I became an agent. I worked at the Irene Goodman Agency for a number of years, repping commercial fiction. And when I say commercial, that is not a bad word. I just mean genres that sell a lot of copies, that are really popular. And that's a word that we use to kind of differentiate from literary fiction, which I also love. But I worked on some women's fiction, some thrillers and mysteries, some YA. And then I moved over to Folio. Folio is based in New York, and our offices there are lovely. I have not seen them in like 2 years, year and a half. And I'm based here in Pittsburgh. But normally, before the pandemic, I would go a lot to meet with publishers, to meet with my colleagues, to meet with any clients that were in the New York area. But now it's been mostly Zoom. As agency, but it's getting larger. And we represent everything from big celebrity nonfiction books to literary gems, to children's books, to bestsellers, pretty much every genre. Almost every genre is covered at Folio. So I tend to represent fiction. I want something that's compelling and voicey and like an elevated beach read. Like I want it to be so fun to read. I want the pages to turn, but I also want to feel like I learned something or I didn't just waste my time. It's not just pure entertainment. I want something substantial out of it. I have colleagues who focus more on serious nonfiction, colleagues who focus on graphic novels, colleagues who focus on memoir. So whatever you're writing, if you go to the agents page on the Folio website, I bet you can find someone who's interested in what you're writing. What I like about Folio is that we are collaborative. I'm working with a couple different agents on different projects where we might combine forces and say, okay, let's work together on this kids nonfiction book because this person knows the kids market and this person knows the nonfiction market. Let's join forces. And that's pretty unusual in the agenting world. So who here already knows what a literary agent is? Some people, okay. Who here has queried an agent? Okay, and who here has found that experience to be just so amazing and life affirming? Yeah, it's rough out there. So I'm gonna explain a little bit more about what literary agents do, but more specifically how it relates to you. Because you are all writers, you're studying the craft. you're in this program or have graduated from this program. And the world of agents and publishing can be very opaque. And I want to try to demystify it as much as possible, which is why I really want you to ask questions. Basically, a literary agent is trying to find excellent material. We might get that through our query letters. We might get that through referrals. We might get that from doing events like this or conferences. If you're on the more literary end of things, which I suspect some of you are, most of you are, publishing in journals, literary magazines, agents will browse those and think, oh my gosh, this person has such a great voice. To them and see if they have a book, you know, that they're working on, or would they do a book? So the process can be daunting. When you're looking for an agent, a lot of it, there's a lot of chatter online. Do your research, target this, make your query so personal. And it feels like there's a lot of information. It can feel like some of it conflicts or a lot of it conflicts. So what I think you should do is simply determine first, do I need an agent? Probably yes, but not in all cases. I used to say if you're doing poetry, you don't really need an agent, but that has changed just in the years since I've been an agent. You can still submit to publishers directly and journals directly, but, and I think this is because of the rise of the Instapoet, there have been, traditional publishing has been more embracing of poetry. And there are agents who do a really great job of that. I have two colleagues, Catherine Latshaw and Erin Harris, who've been doing some amazing poetry deals. So that has changed. If you're writing for a general audience, a mass audience, you probably will want an agent. If you're publishing in the genres that you see in the bookstores, on tables, you know, thriller, mystery, general fiction, romance, YA, middle grade, nonfiction memoir, you probably want an agent. But I will say, in my own experience, I can only represent and sell a small portion of the things I like to read. Like, there are so many unique small presses, university presses, literary journals, there's self-publishing, like there's so many ways to get your work out there. This is just one path. It's not the only path. But if your goal is a traditional publishing deal, I recommend that you look in the back of all the books that you love and look in the acknowledgements and see who the agent is. Now, that might not work for a book published 50 years ago, but if you're reading in your current market, current genre, check the acknowledgements, see who those agents are. Some of them may not have an online presence, some of them may be retired, some of them may be so successful that they don't even deign to look at email anymore. But they might be the good, right? They're not looking for new stuff anymore, but there are other agents there who are. So that would be my first step. Also, Publishers Marketplace is a great resource. They list deals, they list agents, so you can see who is selling what kind of books, a brief description of the book, and to who. You can sign up and get a free email once a week from them. I would not obsess over those when you're writing or when you're on submission. I would not obsess over, oh my gosh, something about turtles just sold and I'm writing about turtles. That can be counterproductive. But to give you a sense of what's selling and how people are talking about books and what agents are working in your areas of interest can be really helpful. You can also sign in and search for agents. It does cost money. I think it's like $20 a month. So my life hack for all of you is to share a login or just pay for 1 month. Now, all of you can't share one login because they check the IP and you'll get kicked off, but you can pay for 1 month. You don't have to pay for a whole year. So just do that when you're researching. I would also start when you have a completed project or a polished proposal. If it's nonfiction, it can be on proposal. If it's fiction, if it's a novel, You're gonna want the whole thing to be done, especially if it's a debut. Now, if you have already published 5 books and they've all sold really well, that's a different conversation. But you want it to feel as polished as possible. Your agent will likely work with you to improve it even further, because you may be a wonderful, wonderful writer, but there might be some things you don't see, or there may be some things that the agent wants you to tweak to make it more saleable. And that's part of the conversation and relationship with the agent. But you want it to be as polished and strong as you think it can be. The query letter, there are a lot of resources out there, but that's where it basically starts. The most common way of getting an agent, the most common way for me to find a client is through my query inbox. I am not looking for, the most earth-shattering query letter in the world. A well-written query letter that is clear and direct will get my attention. It doesn't have to be the voiciest, the most intimate, I'm looking for good writing in the areas I represent. So as long as you do that in a clear way, most agents will either be able to see quickly if they're a fit for you or not. Yes, it helps if you put a line at the top saying why you are querying that agent. I have some friends over at Manuscript Wishlist and Manuscript Academy, and they did some study that showed if you say why you're querying that agent, it's got a much higher success rate. So you may say things like, I am querying you because you rep thriller author Nina Lauren and I love her work, or something like that. You may say, I saw you speak at this conference, or you stated an interest in magical realism. So even if it's just something like that, it doesn't have to be super detailed or stalkery. You don't have to say, I noticed from stalking your Instagram that, that you're, gluten-free and I just brought, whatever. Like, don't get too personal, don't get too stalkerish, but something about the books they've repped or what their agency reps is helpful. You want a clear, short, concise description of what your book is. Basically, it's like, I want to know just the facts, like what genre is it, first of all? I like to know word count. Not everyone asks for word count. The reason I ask is because I can get all kinds of things. I can say, oh yes, I have my 300,000 word memoir of, myself ages 1 through 9. And you think, oh, no. That means this person can't edit. And also, oh my goodness. Also, I had someone at a conference in South Carolina, one of the first conferences I ever did, sat down, did a pitch session. She started pitching me about her novel, which was only 20,000 words. And I told her, that's on the short side, for an adult novel, this is the general word count. She burst into tears. No one had told her that. And of course there are exceptions. Maybe it was, a fabulous novella, but I just think that is one kind of hurdle that I can see right away. Is this getting closer to a book-shaped thing? Or is it, not formed yet, or just, way too long? Obviously, middle grade YA, different word counts than say adult fiction, fantasy tends to have longer word counts, etc. I would put the genre, or as, and when I say genre, I mean, what big bucket are we putting your book in? What shelf is it on? You don't have to get super duper specific and say it is, it is a werewolf historical romance with X, Y, and Z tropes in it. I just want to know, is this YA? Is this adult? Is this romance? Is this thriller? Yes, there are subcategories, especially for mystery and thriller. Is it soft-boiled? Is it hard-boiled? Is it medium-boiled? Just tell me what general area you think it's in, because your agent may also have some thoughts on how to categorize it, how to position it, how to talk about it. I had a client pitch me, well, she became a client. I had a writer pitch me a novel called The Psych Ward. and she called and it was a medical thriller. Well, actually, and her query letter was really weird. It was like, hold on to your horses, Rachel. Like, buckle up for a crazy ride. And actually loved the book, and I signed her, and we've worked together for many books. But this book turned out to be psychological thriller or domestic suspense. The title ended up being Little Black Lies, but it was not the psych ward, which sounds like a horror novel or horror movie set in a psych ward. And it was not a medical thriller. Yes, there's a backdrop of psychology, but she didn't know, but she was hinting at things, and we were able to work together to really figure out, well, what is this, and how do we position it so that publishers are interested? So I wouldn't get too caught up in the details. Same thing with comps. I find, oh, by the way, am I going too fast? I'm very excited talking to actual people. Same with comp titles. If someone chooses a really excellent tagline or comp selection, like, this is one I get all the time. My book is Harry Potter meets Twilight. Well, nowadays, there's so many other things you can comp to other than Harry Potter or J.K. Rowling, but also those books are huge. They're also movies. Also, they're kind of old. They've been around a long time. So you want to pick something that's closer to your book in terms of tone or scope. But it's a weird art. It's not the way I use comps and talk to editors about them is probably different than how an author might talk about them. So if you read widely in your genre, which I hope you do and you should do, that'll be really helpful to you. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what publishers like to see is comps that are set within 1 to 3 years, that have been published within 1 to 3 years. So even if you're, comping something that was 5 years ago, that feels like ancient history in publishers' eyes. However, if it's the perfect comp, that's okay. I had a spate of everything in my inbox being Eat, Pray, Love, but for X for years. I just, it's Eat, Pray, Love for this, Eat, Pray, Love for that. And like, if that is what it is and that really works, go ahead and use it. But you can use books, you can use movies, you can use TV shows, you can use pop culture. But I wouldn't overly stress about getting it exactly right, because as long as you're giving a flavor of what the book is, your agent will probably help pick better comps down the line that are more useful in terms of talking to editors. The reason we like comps is because we have no imagination. No, that's not it. It is because publishers like to see things that have sold well in the past so they can wrap their heads around, well, what is the audience for this book? And is it worth us spending our money on it and hopefully getting a return on that money? And how can we talk about it in a teeny tiny soundbite to our sales force, to booksellers, to reviewers, to Reese Witherspoon, should she be in an elevator with you? So that's why comps are important, but I wouldn't obsess over that. So you send out these queries into the ether. A lot more people are using web forms now or Query Manager. Has anyone here used Query Manager? Okay, I have not used it myself, but apparently it is very helpful because you can see if your query has been opened or marked maybe or yes. So it gives you a little more information. But honestly, it's a waiting game, and the waiting sucks. It just sucks. There's a lot of waiting, and sometimes you don't know, did they get the email? Are they reading it? Are they liking it? So I would send out your queries. I would do it in batches. I would query very widely, 5 or 10, and I would stagger them. That way, if you're sending out query letters and it's literally crickets and no one is requesting pages or a full manuscript, well then before you query a whole nother round, let's shake something up. Let's change something in your query letter. Maybe you change the beginning lines. Maybe you think about, well, am I is the comps, are the comps right? Is there something I can switch up here before you go to more? It is a numbers game. My husband, Nick Courage, who is a writer, I think he queried like 50 people before he got an agent. And he worked in publishing. So yes, a lot of it feels like, oh, it's who you know and it's connections and this and that. But even with those connections, it's still really rough out there. So my advice to you is query in rounds. Try to think of it like a video game or something where you're like, it's just about the numbers and connecting with the right person at the right time, and then throw yourself into the next project while you're querying. And the waiting is hard. And then, if you're lucky, an agent will say, oh my goodness, this sounds great. Please send me the full manuscript. So you email the full manuscript. It should probably be a Word doc unless they request a PDF or something else. You want to send it right away because, at least speaking for myself, I know that I have the memory of a gnat. So I could request something and you could say, well, okay, well, I'm still revising. So is it okay if I send it to you in 6 months? And you can send it in 6 months, but I will probably have completely forgotten about it, or I may have something else taking up my time at that point in time. So that's why you want to be ready. You want to be ready. And then I would recommend, usually agents try to say this on their website or their manuscript wishlist page, but you can say like, what's your estimated reading time? What's your ETA? So that you have a ballpark, so that oh my gosh, I didn't hear from them in 5 minutes. Well, that's okay. They're probably still reading, and some people, the reading times are really long. Right now in publishing, everyone is much slower than usual. I'm seeing this on the editor level. It takes about 1 week to get a simple email response on anything, and it can take several months for people to read. So be patient, but you can ask. If they don't give you an ETA, you can say, oh, wonderful, like, I'm so excited you're reading. Could you let me know, your approximate reading time, and I'll follow up then. That way you're setting some expectations, and it's also helping them kind of, get it done in the time frame they give you, but hey, that's the time frame they set, so it may help. When an agent work with you, really do a call or a Zoom meeting with you. I email the person to schedule that, so it's like, I don't really come out and say it, like, hey, I'm gonna offer you rep. And this is an opportunity for you as writers to ask questions and also suss out does this feel good for me? And the reason too is that I'm also sussing the situation manuscript, but if the author and I are talking and we realize, oh my gosh, we see the book totally differently, or we have different expectations or different styles or whatever, that's amazing. I don't think I've ever had a call and then not. There's that possibility. You might just, okay, this see, and they see it as women's fiction and I see it as romance and whatever. So there are good resources online, but you really want to ask about the nuts and bolts of how they will represent you. What is their editorial vision? Do they want you to do revisions? They probably do, but are they light? Are they heavy-handed? Are they when will they get you those revisions? Is it gonna be in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years? Probably want it on the sooner side. And how do they like to work? What is their communication style? But also pipe up about yours. If you have specific needs as a writer, I would be upfront about those. And if you're like, you know what, I'm not a phone person, I would rather have emails, that's fine. And I would share your communication style as well as ask about theirs. If you have other projects or other things you would like to write, I always ask about that because I'm signing the person for this particular book, but ideally I'm helping to build a career. That doesn't mean you have to only write in that genre, but it is nice to know upfront, oh yes, and I'm also interested in, writing YA someday, or I have a cookbook idea. Now, maybe your agent or potential agent may not be the right agent for that genre, but at least, you know, you're going in knowing about that. You can ask, well, what happens if one of us decides that they don't want to work with the other anymore? That can be a scary question to ask, but that is perfectly okay. People part ways all the time. They part ways amicably, and they can part ways less than amicably. But you're signing with someone, and the hope is that they're going to rep you for years and years and years, and you're all going to, you know, do tons of book deals together. But your career needs may change, their needs may change. They may leave the business. They may stop representing your genre. You know, there's all these different reasons. So you just want to simply ask. And usually it's something like, well, you have to like put it in writing in an email, and it give us like, most agencies will have an agency agreement between the author and the agent or the agency. If the agency doesn't have one, that's a little weird. I would prefer you to have something in paper that outlines the parameters, the percentages, the time frame, everything that you can have in the agency agreement. It's okay to ask to look at one before you sign it. It's okay to ask questions about it. Some agencies have something that's very simple, like a 1 page or half a page. Where I am at Folio is more intense because we sell a lot of subrights and we cover every eventuality. So, you know, say you do a line of cookbooks and then we're going to help you get branded spatulas. You know, we go into that level of detail. But I wouldn't just do it on a handshake. That people used to do that. And for some people it's worked out, but nowadays you'd want an agency agreement. It is also, oh my gosh, that's 30 minutes. I'm going to keep going a little bit and then we're going to go to questions. It's also okay to say, hey, can I speak to one of your clients? I would ask if you feel like that is a piece of information that you need to make your decision, I would ask for that. A lot of people don't need that. They get enough of a impression from the books the agent represents, the reputation of the agency, and the conversation itself, but it is okay to ask that. I wouldn't say, can I speak to 5 clients? I would say, can I speak to 1? And then the agent can connect you. There's a lot of talk online about, well, is that okay? Does that offend the agent? I think that is totally fine and normal. I wouldn't email even gotten the call or a manuscript request, because authors too are busy and need to protect their creative time, and they just don't have time to talk to a million different people who might want to work with this one agent. But it's perfectly okay to ask. Then your agent will work with you on polishing the manuscript or the proposal. They will go on submission. So my job is to get it in the best shape possible that I think will sell. And I try to make it as attractive and exciting to publishers as possible. Publishing is a business. There is a lot of art involved. There's a lot of emotion involved, but it is a business. So I am trying to give them something that they can sell and be excited about. But it really starts with that emotional connection between the editor who's reading it and falling in love with it and getting a vision for it. So it used to be that I would call up editors on the phone and talk to them. They could hear the enthusiasm in my voice. They could ask questions. Now it's mostly email, although I do have Zoom meetings and things like that with editors, and I will meet with them in person again someday. But mostly it's an email explaining what is the book, why you're excited about it, why it's special. And they say, oh, of course I want to see it. And you send them the manuscript. I have spent many years having coffee, lunches, drinks, phone calls, Zoom meetings with editors. And you try to get to know their personal taste as much as possible. You try to get to know, especially if there's anything, what I like to know is there anything that they're not getting sent that they would love to have? Because some people get typecast. If they do a lot of fantasy, then everyone only sends them fantasy. Well, their list may be too full of fantasy now. So you try to find that opening, or everyone sends this kind of book to their boss, but not to them. Why not? I like to mix it up and have some executive level and senior level editors, as well as like some more junior assistant and associate level editors on a sub list. In these pandemic times, the time frame is all over the place. Certain nonfiction books, especially if someone has, 1 million Instagram followers, those will sell very quickly. Novels and memoirs that are more subjective and 300 pages long, as opposed to a book proposal, those take longer. We handpick the list of editors, the right person for it and excited about it, but still, they might pass on the manuscript, they might not get to it for a while, or they might fall in love and try to make an offer. What happens then is, if a lot of people are interested, we try to drum up excitement and we'll hold an auction. An auction can raise the price. It can make publishers put their most competitive, author-friendly deal aspects on the table. But I've sold lots of books that didn't go to auction. Sometimes you just need one. Now, yes, you have less leverage when when only one person is interested versus 5, but your agent can negotiate to get you the best advance possible, make sure the terms are as strong and author-friendly as possible, whether it's the royalty rates, whether it's the territories, whether it's the option material, and lots of other nitty-gritty inside baseball stuff, which I could talk about for 10 hours and we would still not be done. Another important piece of the puzzle are subrights. So mainly my job is selling your book to an American publisher for North American rights, a US publisher, which is basically publishing US and Canada rights. But sometimes you will do a world deal or a world English deal. And we like to retain those rights so that we can sell them separately for you so that you can get more money and you have more control over the terms. So that might be your book in translation. Is it being sold in Japan, in Japanese, all around the world? There are also world English rights because there are lots of places in the world that speak English, but are not within the borders of the United States. There are also audio rights, which are very hot as more and more people listen to audio, especially digital audio. And then there's film and TV, where we will partner with a film and TV agent and get those rights sold. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle in terms of thinking of your book project as a pie, and there's all these different pieces that we like to cut up so we can sell more for you. Also, the deal, it could be a 1-book deal, could be a multiple book deal. Right now, it's 1 and 2 book deals that I'm seeing. It's not so much people buying a series of 5 books all at once, unless it's a really established name. And then also thinking about what's next. I have so many clients who, they might have so many ideas, but they want to pick the one that's most likely to sell. I think. So I'll work with my clients after they've published, if they have a question or an idea, or help them figure out what's next in their career. They might be writing for a genre that's drying up and they want to go into a new genre because they're interested in it. How can we do that? I have been going on for quite a while, so I'm going to stop so we can go to questions. Please, if you are on Zoom, put it in the chat. I will check. And if you are here, please raise your hand, and then you will come up and ask the question into the microphone so everyone can see and hear you. And I will just mix it up. Let me just see. I think I have one on Zoom. Okay. All right. I'm going to read one question and then we'll go to an in-person question. This is from Dan. Hi, I have 2 questions. One, is it 100% to get individual stories from a collection published before querying an agent? Or can you get an agent before/without getting those stories published? Okay, let me tackle the first one first before I get to the second question. And I haven't even talked about collections or short stories yet. They used to be really hard to do. Obviously, it is easier to sell a novel than a short story collection. unless you happen to have written Cat Person or, you know, you're published in the New Yorker or something like that. But it is possible to get an agent for a collection of short stories or to get their interest with a short story and then sell. What I see typically happen is someone will sell a novel and a collection. It is much, much easier to do that if some of those stories have been published. It is just much, much easier. Yes, there's a chance that an agent could fall in love with your voice and take you on, but most likely they're going to discover those stories in a journal that they're paging through anyway. So I would attempt to get not all, but some of them published. And then the stories in my collection vary widely in tone/type, plus it's a story cycle. So no one or two stories really get across the idea of the project as a whole necessarily. Should I send my best written story or one or two that's as reflective of the project as I can get because they are the same stories, LOL. So I don't work with a lot of short fiction. I like to read short stories and collections that have been, I don't have a lot of firsthand knowledge, but what I will say about my colleagues who do short stories is they typically like to see something that has been published. They would like you to send them one or two stories, depending on the word count of those stories is, you know, every agent has different guidelines to see. And then overview, you should say something like, this is how these stories work together. This is how they're connected with a table of contents. Okay, let's do a person question. Yes, will you come up and ask it into the microphone?
Hello, thank you again for coming down here to talk with us about this. Hi, friends on Zoom, I miss you guys. I just had a quick question. You were discussing about the word count. What is the typical word count when it comes to YA or romance or typical adult fiction? I'm kind of working on my thesis right now and I kind of want to get the idea going before I start the process and everything.
Okay, so word count. Sometimes this, you know, everything is a range. So for YA, I would say anywhere from 60 to 90,000 words. Some are much longer, especially if they're, you know, epic fantasy or something like that. So they can be longer. I wouldn't do much shorter than 60. For adult, for romance, I'm not exactly sure how different romance word counts would be from just general fiction, general adult fiction romance, but I generally sell books that are anywhere from 75,000 to 100,000 words. But I will tell you, most agents get a little nervous when they see a word count much over 100K. And if it's too short, it means it's either a novella or there's not enough there. So you want at least 70, 75. If you're writing general fiction, I would shoot for 80 to 90 as your sweet spot because you can always add or subtract. Next question from Rania. Rania, did I pronounce your name right? Oh, Rania's on Zoom. Okay. And in general, what are the chances, sorry. And in general, what are the chances for translated fiction to be accepted on the publishing marketplace here in the US, especially for new writers who are new to publish in the US? Okay, I think I know. Okay, so for translated fiction, there's an increase in interest in it right now, I would say. I think that publishing is trying to be a little less focused just on the US and looking more globally and looking at more cultures. So there are certain publishers, depending on the genre you're writing, that do books in translation. I know, for example, one of my colleagues, Jeff Kleinman, is particularly looking for stories from the Middle East. So that is an area where he is looking for books in translation, and he's talking to agents who live over there or work with publishers over there. There is, you all probably know about this, but there's an organization called City of Asylum, which is based in Pittsburgh, and they do a lot of work with books in translation. So I do think that there is an interest in it. My advice would be to try to find an agent in the language or area that you are writing from and have them shop your rights globally. But there are particular agents and editors who are interested in it. So I would recommend looking on, first of all, look on Manuscript Wishlist. They're a great site for agents and editors who are saying more specifically and with more room what they're looking for in a way that's goes into more detail than Publishers Marketplace or their agency website. So I would definitely look for people who are looking for work in translation. And if it's a specific area, for example, there's a YA editor I know who really wants Asian, particularly Southeast Asian stories. So I have been looking for something like that for her, but I wouldn't have known that if we weren't having an in-depth conversation about it. And let's see. Oh, and then just going on about foreign rights and translation rights. So Folio has its own in-house foreign rights department. So if we reserve rights, they will go out and sell them around the world. Some agencies don't have their own in-house department. They will work with an international rights company. So when I was at Irene Good, and worked with a bunch of different agencies to sell things all over the world. And if you're really interested in translation and foreign rights, there are some big international conferences. There's the London Book Fair, there's the Bologna Book Fair, where publishers, agents, scouts, translators from all over the world meet up. Lately, it's been virtually, but I would look into some of those too in case there's people you could meet or something you're interested in there. An in-person question.
Thank you. Hi. Can you give us a short nonfiction account of working with an author from the query letter to book auction?
Yes.
Thank you.
Nonfiction. Yes. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just a story.
Yeah. It's really different if it's someone with a big platform or not, because it can go much faster, but I'll just tell the story of one that I just sold. It hasn't been announced yet, but I am working with an author who is a teacher, and she wrote a book proposal called How to Love Teaching Again. And it is partially her experience, but it's also partially self-help for teachers because teachers are extremely burnt out, they're overworked, especially over the past year, but this was conceived of before the pandemic. And so this proposal came across my desk from another agent who had seen it and thought, oh, that's a nice idea, but not for me. Like I'm too busy or I'm not interested in teachers or whatever. And I was a 5th grade teacher. So they sent it to me and I loved it. I totally got it. It's basically the thesis is you have to take care of yourself and you have to have boundaries. And that's what makes you a better teacher, not working yourself to the bone 24/7. And then here are some actual strategies you can use. And this book sold pretty quickly. I loved it and I got it immediately. I gave the author notes because there were a few things that were unclear. Was it for K through 12 teachers? Was it just for elementary teachers because she's an elementary school teacher? Can we say more about the promotion section and how she would be selling this book? And also she's unusual in that she has built a business creating and selling materials to other teachers. So she had that foundation, but to translate it to the book publishing world, my one fear was that publishers would think it was too niche. Yes, there are millions of teachers out there, but it's not a book for everyone under the sun. It's just for teachers. And yes, you might get something out of it if you're not a teacher, but it's for teachers. So my fear was that publishers would think it was too niche. But we were able to hone the message and get it out. And people really responded to it. I think mostly because a lot of stuff about teachers have been in the news, you know, with the pandemic. A lot of parents who were dealing with, you know, Zoom school, et cetera, realized, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how hard this was. So I think that even if you didn't have a teacher in your life, you are aware of its importance. And so people really responded. So that happened very quickly. We set up a series of Zoom meetings with publishers. And one of the publishers had some very specific questions about connecting the platform with the message of the book. And we answered those questions, and then we used those answers. We also shared them with the other publishers who are interested in saying, you know, someone else asked about this, just FYI, da 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 da. And it was all very impressive. And we had an auction, and the book sold really well. So that was an example of having a really strong concept. I mean, How to Love Teaching Again, just the title, it kind of encapsulates it. And it did go faster because the author has a platform. And we were able to overcome the hurdle of, well, you know, is this just a niche market? Should this be with an educational publisher? And, you know, we sold to a mainstream publisher. Did that answer your question? Okay, let me see, I have more online. Sheila, is it time for me to stop, or can I keep going? I know I'm long-winded. Okay, yes, okay, I'll go fast. I'm gonna go quickly through a couple of the chat questions. Do I think there will soon be a space for shorter works like chapbooks and novellas in traditional publishing? I actually do. Oh, this is from Anna. I do. I think there are some publishers that are getting more flexible, but like everything in publishing, change is really, really slow. I have seen people on the Kidlit side, loaded word counts. We need short, fun books. They don't all have to be super long. So I do think so, but in terms of chapbooks or things that are produced in a more interesting way with probably illustrations or mixing media, I'm seeing some more of that, but not a ton. Amanda says, I've heard repeatedly from agents that memoir is very hard to sell right now. Is this what your experience is as well? Any thoughts on why it is so hard to sell? Thank you. Yeah, it is my experience that it is hard to sell. I think it's because it is so subjective. You need a really, really, really strong voice. It's like a novel. It's got more novelistic elements in it than saying, well, I'm trying to sell a book about, you know, how to can tomatoes, which is kind of easier to encapsulate, and you can also in a much easier way figure out, okay, who's the audience for people who want to learn how to can tomatoes and how do we get to them? I think that we hear about the really big successful memoirs, but it's really hard to break out of the pack and show why yours is different, whether it's extraordinarily written or it's from a voice or an experience that hasn't been talked about a lot before. It is hard. I wish it wasn't so hard because there are a lot of wonderful, interesting stories out there that may not be by someone with 1 million Instagram followers, but it's very subjective. And other in-person questions? Yes, please come on up.
So I was wondering if you've ever directly approached a writer first, and how often or rarely does that kind of a thing happen?
So I've only done that a couple of times, but my colleagues who work mostly in nonfiction do that all the time. They'll read an article, whether it's in Modern Love or a magazine or whatever, or find someone online and approach them. Or literary fiction. They might meet someone at a place like this or at AWP or read something in a journal and directly go after that person. I have done that a little bit. I actually just signed a client who found in the library. I loved it. And I went to the acknowledgement section of the book to see who his agent was, because I do that every time I read something. And I didn't see an agent thanked. And I thought, what a jerk. Who is this guy? I did some more research and I realized he is also a literary agent. So, but I didn't know him already. And anyway, we struck up a correspondence. I wasn't necessarily trying to represent him, but we had this whole conversation and I read the rest of his books, and it happened very organically that he sent me his manuscript and now we're working together. So I guess I did directly contact him, even though it was more from like a fan perspective, like, hey, I love this. But nonfiction and memoir, it does, I mean, nonfiction and literary fiction, it happens more. Is it more difficult to have, okay, Valerie says, is it more difficult to have a career in traditional publishing if you write in multiple genres? Are editors and agents looking for writers they can market in a certain niche? How would the career path be different for a writer in multiple genres? Okay, in general, publishers and agents want you to build a readership. So that means not hopping, from rock to rock, but really building a readership, giving people what they loved about your first book and giving it to them again, but slightly different, and building and building and building on that. However, I represent a bunch of people who do multiple genres, but they tend to be related genres. They tend what's YA with a romantic element. They might also write adult with a romantic element. But I do have people who write middle grade and adult. I have an author who wrote nonfiction, The Animal Lover's Guide to Changing the World. Well, she also writes fiction. It does have an eco theme, but it's very different. So I would have that conversation early with an interested agent. I think you do want to build up a readership and not just go wildly from one, if you're writing children's picture book and then your next book is hardcore erotica and then you're doing a cookbook, it's going to be really hard to build a readership and they might be in conflict with each other. So it is part of the overall strategy. So talk to your agent about that. And some publishers, so I'm working with source books with a couple clients and they are very data driven. So they really hone in on the so specific, like readers love the mom aspect of this book. So let's make sure we have a mom aspect in the next book. And that really surprised me because it was just the level, same general field. Is it worth trying to get an agent? Oh, this is from Dan. Is it worth trying to get an agent if you're aiming for a university press or only if you're aiming for one of the publishing houses? So this is a really good question. I always think, why not try for the big publishing deal, the traditional publishing deal? However, traditional publishing is really publishing only a very narrow slice of what could be written and what could be valuable and interesting and worthwhile and entertaining. They're trying to maximize sales. That's what traditional publishers are trying to do. And we have seen, there's been so many interesting books coming out from smaller presses or university presses. So it's fine to if that's your route, you can apply directly to those presses. You can also, pitch agents. And if you get picked up by one, great, because they can either help you get the traditional deal or at least improve a deal with a smaller university press and make that a more advantageous contract for you. And if they're not interested, well, screw them, you're gonna go do your own thing. You can, do something directly with a publisher anyway. And a folio does, we've done deals with like MIT Press, Chicago University Press. We do that. Generally, we're looking for the big traditional deal, but sometimes it really makes sense to work with a different style publisher. So it's up to you, but I would go for it and then always know that you can approach those places directly. Okay, do you mind if I keep going or should I, Sheila? I'm like a dog that has been let out into the dog park and I just can't stop talking. And thank you for bearing with me. How does one become a literary agent? This is from Lisa. I'm a lawyer in this program, and I'm considering the possibility of a career pivot maybe one day in the future. I do criminal law now. Would a law degree be a benefit? How much latitude is there? Negotiating, drafting the contract, or everything standard form? Okay, lots of questions here. I think having a law degree would be a huge asset to a literary agent. And if I had one, I would lead with that. I would wear a big t-shirt that says I have a law degree. I think it'd be very helpful. Some agents are, there is a lot of negotiation at the deal stage and on the contract stage. And so a lot of agencies will either have an in-house contracts person or attorney that they work with. Becoming a literary agent is very unstable. It is not like a regular job where you get a paycheck, health insurance, 401k. It's like, if you sell a book, you will get a percentage of a percentage in a long time. So you really have to think about the financial aspect of it. However, I know that there are a lot, not a lot, but there are some literary attorneys who authors or agents hire to do contracts for them who know the business, and that could be possibly more steady and lucrative work. I think also a lot of writers are disillusioned lawyers. So you probably already know some people who are working on some pretty good books you could sell, especially if you're working in criminal law. So the negotiating and the legal aspect, like there is leeway there, but it is a very different world in terms of pay scale from being a lawyer. And it's it's just completely different. Do agents and editors, oh, this is from Renee. Do agents and or editors care whether an author has been published before? Are they more or less likely to work with someone brand new? There is this like weird, like desire for the debut author. People make a big deal about debuts. And I do think it's ridiculous because I have seen so many 10-year overnight successes or someone hitting their stride, and it's not always the debut novel. But there is a weird focus on debuts in publishing, and that's because there's no sales track to compare it to. So they can go out to Barnes & Noble and they can go out to all the retailers and show them this shiny new thing and not have to say, well, yeah, the other one only sold, 2,000 copies, which is probably the publisher's fault, not the writer's fault. But there is this focus on debut. But if you've published before, that's not a liability. I would play it up. If you got a good review somewhere, even if you only got one review or one blurb, use it, leverage it to get the next. Pursue a career in publishing / becoming an agent. I'll be very quick. So there are a couple ways I would recommend looking into. Well, there's job boards on Publishers Weekly and Pub Marketplace. There are a lot of internships going on. Publishing is trying to be better about paying for internships rather than just like taking free labor. So I would, I would look into that because there are agencies that pay. There are also agencies that do make it more almost like a college course. Like Folio has this whole intern academy where we teach, each of the agents teaches a different piece of the business every week, and it's very involved. So you could start out looking at internships or entry-level jobs. Because of the pandemic, more places are open to remote. So wherever you are, you don't have to go to New York and live in New York. That still helps, but it's really opened up. I would also look not just at the large publishers, but there's like smaller publishers, mid-sized publishers. There's also companies, you could do book reviewing. There are companies like Goodreads. There are different ways to get into publishing that do not necessarily mean editor at Random House. I would also really look into departments like publicity and marketing and sales. Those are a great way to get your foot in the door, get experience, and then figure out what you want to do. And it's easier to go from there. I would apply really widely and aggressively. If you get an interview, mention books from that imprint fairly recently. Don't just talk about, you know, something you read in college or something, you know, one of the classics. Really show that you're paying attention to current stuff. Send a nice thank you note. And what was the other thing that really helped me? Yeah, I was just really persistent. I was working at a Barnes & Noble in Rockefeller Center and explaining to people that was nonfiction. That's why it wasn't in the fiction section. And, you know, I interviewed till I got that publicity job. Also, the moment one of you gets a job in publishing, help the rest of the group, whether you're in a Facebook group or a Slack or email list, because you will see internal job listings before they're posted. And you will see, you will know if so-and-so's assistant is quitting, and then you help best way. The publishers get so many applications for jobs. It's very competitive, not in terms of the money they pay, but in terms of the amount of people for whatever open position. So anyway, that's my advice, is help each other. And any last questions before I start? Yes, please.
I have to put it down because I'm like 5 foot. So something I was thinking about when you were talking about comps, something I was thinking about when we were talking about comps and query letters was you were saying that you can compare to like pop culture and movies and TV shows. Does that ever harm you if you like compare to those things in like instead of like literary fiction, or does it depend on what genre you're writing in?
That's a really good question. I would have at least one of your things be a book, but it could be my novel is, you know, X meets Breaking Bad or whatever. So it can, I would probably choose prestige TV. I would probably choose an HBO show if you're going to use TV, or some, you know, something like that. If it's a book and a movie or a book and a show, that's better than 2 movies or 2 TV shows or like a video game and something else. I don't think it will harm you because you want to show that you understand what's popular and what's culturally interesting. Yeah, so I know I have rambled. I have been so excited to talk to you all. Please, when you are querying, think of Folio, check out the Folio website, look at the various agents. I am closed to queries right now simply because I have a huge backlog. But in general, when I open back up, I'm interested in adult fiction, YA fiction, anything with an eco or nature theme, I am very interested in. And I wish you all so much luck. You are so courageous and wonderful to be writing and pursuing this and going after it. And it can be hard. Querying can be hard. Publishing can be hard. But we need your stories. We need writers. We need good writers. So please, please go out there and share your work. Okay, thank you very much.